Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Brendan Glasheen. Today is our annual NFL Breakout Candidates episode with Action Network NFL expert Chris Raybon. And returning to the show, Action alum, friend of the pod. He does great work over at Fantasy Life as an NFL expert. We have Matthew Friedman joining us, just as he did last year. We're going to highlight a couple of under-the-radar players as we look to identify a few guys who could see dramatic upticks in performance this coming season. Before we dive in, we did a little digging based on what you guys gave out last year. We wanted to list out some of those candidates. You guys hit on a couple, didn't hit on a couple, but that's how it goes. Chris Raybon highlighted last year heading into 2023. He hit on Justin Fields, George Pickens, Alexander Mattison, Drake London, Jahan Dotson, and his bonus name was Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid. Friedman was on Tua Tagovailoa, Nakobe Dean of the Eagles, Zamir White, Tariq Woolen, Seahawks corner, Steelers left tackle Broderick Jones, and a bonus name included Chiefs wide receiver Rashid Rice. Any of you guys have quick thoughts on how you did last year, Raybon?
Yeah, I think, looking at a guy like Dalton Kincaid, just kind of following the targets and the talent, that worked out. A guy like Madison, that was a whiff. Kind of chasing the opportunity there. But I'm going to talk about a Madison adjacent back on this episode. So stay tuned.
Friedman, the Miami offense certainly hit last year with Tua Tagovailoa at the controls, and then some other pieces, including Rice was your bonus name last year.
Yeah, felt decent about how that list reads now. Of course, Nakobe Dean was just a massive whiff last year, but who knows? Maybe there will be a bounce back for him. And felt good about, Zamir White, the way he closed the season last year. So, I don't think that really counts as a breakout, but maybe it kind of points towards the possibility of a breakout this year. And, of course, getting Rashid Rice, who knows exactly what happens with him this year, but he certainly flashed last year as a rookie.
Okay, there you go. So there's your recap of last year. Let's dive into this year. Raybon, start us off. Your first breakout candidate for 2024.
I'm going with Anthony Richardson, Colts quarterback, rookie last year, only played 4 games, continued to suffer injuries every time he got on the field. But I think that might, kind of turn some people off to him or just kind of worry people. I know he's got the shoulder issue, and you never like to hear a quarterback with that, but if he's healthy, and it sounds like he's going to be entering the season, if he's healthy, this guy just has monster upside. I mean, he's a dual threat quarterback. His rushing success rate last year in those 4 games was 64%. That would have been second in the NFL if he had enough carries to qualify. You're looking at one of the best offensive lines in the league, which I think is really important for a guy like Richardson, who, it's kind of his rookie year still. So last year he took about 2.9 seconds on average to throw. But, behind this offensive line where you got, Smith and Raymond at the tackles, both ranked top 7 out of 81 qualifiers at PFF. Nelson's a blue chipper. Kelly is a top 5 to 7 center in the league. Taylor is going to take attention, off the passing game. And I think, you have a sneaky good receiving core as well. Michael Pittman has been a monster these last couple of years. Josh Downs had a very good rookie year. And then you go and you draft another talented rookie on day 2 in Adonai Mitchell, who can take that Alec Pierce spot, which was essentially a black hole last year. And, maybe one day we'll see, we'll get a Jelani Wood sighting as well, but there is some talent at, pass catching wise at tight end. I mean, the Colts have like 38,000 tight ends as well. So one of them should be able to catch passes, but, supporting cast is good. You're playing indoors. The guy can run, the guy can throw deep, everything checks out, and he's a top 5 talent. So I'll take the risk in fantasy, that he gets hurt again, because I think the upside is there. And I think, if the Colts are able to continue to exceed expectation, which they did last year with Gardner Minshew, Richardson is going to be front and center. But this, if Richardson hits, this is a scary good offense, as good as their offensive line is. and with that receiving core getting better and Taylor in the center. So really like Anthony Richardson to break out in year 2.
In the division, like the defenses aren't all that great. I mean, I think there's upside in that division, right? But the defenses don't present too many glaring challenges, I would think, right? That might help too.
Yeah, I mean, Houston, I think, is going to be a lot better. You know, they signed Danielle Hunter. You know, I really think the only hole for Houston is, you know, that cornerback spot opposite Stingley. Is it going to be Okudah? Is it going to be Lasser? Is the rookie going to step up? But yeah, Jacksonville, I mean, they're always looking for secondary help, and their pass rush is lacking. Tennessee could be better. They're kind of a wild card, but you know, they also lost some talent as well. So yeah, I think it's just it sets up very well for a great statistical season for Richardson. But I think he's a good player, and he'll play really well as long as he's on the field.
Okay, very good. Yeah, Anthony Richardson, 5.5 yards a carry in 4 games last year, cut short due to injury. So Raybon goes with the quarterback. I think Matt Friedman's going to do the same for his first breakout.
Yeah, I'm looking at Jayden Daniels right now. And, you know, whether it's for fantasy, I love him as a guy that's a late round quarterback. I want him in a ton of my drafts. Whether it's the prop market, I love the over on his rushing yardage prop this year. Whether it's the futures market, absolutely love him for offensive rookie of the year. He's 6-1 in that market. And I look at him and compare him to Caleb Williams, who is the clear favorite in that market at, you know, plus 125 right now. Like, tell me what the difference is between Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels. Like, obviously, Williams should be favored in that market. He's got the better supporting cast, but you look at Jayden Daniels, he's the superior rusher, and I think that gives him a really clear edge, both in terms of like his ability to develop, to like extend the developmental runway. Like, think about Josh Allen. Think about like a lot of these other quarterbacks who had running ability, but maybe weren't great kind of quote unquote real life quarterbacks right away. Jalen Hurts, I think, falls into this category because of the rushing ability and that added element in their game. They were able eventually to tread water and then become better passing quarterbacks, better pocket quarterbacks. And I think we could see something like that with Jayden Daniels. He's a Heisman winning quarterback, just like Caleb Williams. He was taken, you know, at the very top of the draft, just behind Caleb Williams. I think in the offensive rookie of the year market, 6-1 for him. I think that those are great odds considering Caleb Williams is at plus 125. So Jayden Daniels, I think we could see not exactly like an RG3 rookie year repeat, but something approaching that in Washington with the Commanders this year. So Jayden Daniels, absolutely love him in all types of ways to invest, whether it's fantasy or sports betting.
What's your go ahead, Raybon.
I was just going to say, I love that because the rookie of the year call out, because I think he is the best value on the board, even though he's, you know, 6-1, he's still high up. But if you look at fantasy drafts, ADP, most sites now have Daniels going ahead of Caleb Williams, especially best ball, which tends to be even sharper than regular ADP. And what do you need to win rookie of the year? You need the best statistical season. Well, if Jayden Daniels is expected to put up more fantasy points, then he's expected to have you know, a better, or at least an on par statistical season, where I think that rushing yardage is the equalizer. And by the way, who's the offensive coordinator in Washington? Cliff Timothy Kingsbury. What happened last time he had a rookie quarterback drafted high in the first round? Kyler Murray, he won rookie of the year. So a lot to like with Jayden Daniels for that rookie of the year.
Friedman, what's your concern level though with the offensive line in Washington?
I mean, I think it's about league average or close to it with some of the upgrades that they've made this offseason. So I wouldn't say like I feel great about it. Certainly doesn't have the offensive line that Anthony Richardson has, for instance. And by the way, I love that call out that Raybon has with Anthony Richardson looking at ADP as like a consensus, like number 5 quarterback. He could have a massive season. So he doesn't have a great offensive line around him, doesn't have great offensive weapons around him, but all of it is serviceable enough to where I think he should be okay.
Okay. Very good. You mentioned Caleb Williams, and that's who Raybon's going to turn to for his second one. I would be curious, Raybon, when you give your analysis on Williams, how it measures with the evaluation of Daniels and how it plays out for that particular market as well for offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah. So full disclosure, I love Daniels. I would have talked about Daniels as well if Freeman hadn't. I think he's my most rostered quarterback in best ball leagues thus far. So I'm right with you, Freeman, on that late round quarterback strategy. But it doesn't have to be an either or, right? I know last year it was where Bryce Young had one of the worst quarterback seasons in the history of the National Football League. CJ Stroud had one of the best. And, so this year, I think both of the top two quarterbacks are going to play really well. And the reason I like Caleb Williams is because, number one, I think there's still doubters, whether it's because of some of the off the field stuff or just, he's kind of a eclectic guy. And then everyone kind of wants to point to the history of Bears quarterbacks that they never put up numbers. They never really do well. I think Caleb Williams will wreck all those narratives. And, Freeman, you mentioned it, the supporting cast, that's really what, Williams has going for him besides having, number one overall pick talent. So a lot of times when you see these highly drafted quarterbacks, they take a couple of years to really blossom, and they might have, subpar rookie years. But you look at some of those guys, like Joe Burrow didn't have, the quality of receivers that he had, that he would have later on with, drafting Jamar Chase that next year. Tua Tagovailoa, he didn't really take off till he got Tyreek Hill. So when you look at Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and then a top 10 pick in Rome Odunze, who on a lot of teams would be the number one wide receiver. On this team, he's probably going to be at best, the third target, if not even lower down the list, because he also got Cole Kmet coming off a breakout year. You got DeAndre Swift, who's an explosive running back out of the backfield who can catch passes. The offensive line should be, I think, at least league average, has some upside to be even better than that. If the tackles kind of work out there. So with Wright, who, didn't have a great rookie year, but he is a top 10 pick. So, if Wright pans out, you got, the interior is pretty good with Jenkins, who graded out in the 82nd percentile at PFF. Bates played well in limited action last year. Nate Davis is a pretty solid guard. So I think and then you have Shane Waldron, who's a McVay disciple, spent the last three years in Seattle, helped turn around Geno Smith. So a lot to like in Chicago with Caleb Williams. So I know there's going to be a lot of doubters and a lot of people talking about the narratives and a lot of people wanting to be contrarian and just go straight for Daniels and forget about Williams, but I love them both. And I just think Williams is too big to fail, so to speak, with this supporting cast. It's just too good. I mean, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore both can command a target over 25% of their routes. And then you throw in a Dunze. I mean, guys are going to be open every single play for Williams.
Yeah, back end of last year, the Bears O-line was much better, like you said, with health. They were a good unit, and PFF has them number 11 entering training camp. So that's good news for the Bears. You mentioned the weapons, but the line play, certainly better down the stretch, and they've got a good grade coming into the year. So another quarterback from Raybon, an offensive coordinator change in Atlanta, and Matthew Friedman thinks that could bode well for Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit cheap almost to say Bijan Robinson is going to have a breakout year when he's going as like the number 2 running back in fantasy drafts. And he had, like 14,000 yards, not 14,000, 1,400 yards from scrimmage last year. But I think that there's a little bit of, I'm trying to think of exactly the right word here, but it's not dissatisfaction with how he performed last year, but like relative to the draft hype that he had entering the league, people thought that he was going to be like rookie year Saquon, and like he certainly, I think, has that potential. And I think we see him hit that this year. Like, I think we go from Bijan Robinson as a guy who disappointing that he has to share this workload with Tyler Algier, disappointing that he's not getting all these goal line carries. Like you see the potential and you're frustrated by the fact that he's not fully utilized in the way that someone with his skill set should be. This year, I think we fully see it. And maybe it's because Zach Robinson as the offensive coordinator comes in and is really able to use him the way he should be used. Maybe it's not even to do with Robinson. It's just addition by subtraction, and that we don't have the previous regime of Arthur Smith there handcuffing Robinson. So whether it's the fact that the new coordinator is good, the old coordinator play caller was bad, maybe a combination of those two things, and also just Bijan Robinson elevating in his second year as a professional. And then, of course, you have a new quarterback coming in Kirk Cousins, who can help elevate that entire offense. And even if Cousins isn't healthy right away, Michael Penix Jr., I feel confident, is, if he plays, probably better than Desmond Ridder. So whether it's Cousins, fully healthy right away and that offense goes, or it's Penix for a time, however it is that the quarterback situation works out, that entire offense, I think, is going to level up this season. And I think that means massive things for Bijan Robinson, who sincerely has 2,000 yard, 17 touchdown type of potential. He could be the RB1. Christian McCaffrey, obviously he's awesome. He's getting older. 49ers like to rotate in running backs, whatever it is. Bijan could be the dude. He could be the RB1 with a massive campaign this year. And so this is just kind of a way of highlighting, people are aware that Bijan Robinson is awesome. He's going as the number 2 running back in fantasy drafts, but the enthusiasm and the potential for him is just unreal this year. So I love Bijan Robinson.
Stability all over the place now, it seems, for the Falcons in a bad division. But the quarterback, no more, as you said, no more Ridder, and Taylor Heineke also saw time last year under center for that team. Okay, very good. So there are your first 2 breakout candidates. Let's go to a third one. Raybon, you're going to turn to a receiver.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on what Friedman said. Totally agree on Bijan with everything he said, except that the 49ers rotate in running backs. As a guy who's made a lot of money betting Elijah Mitchell under 1.5 carries, they do not rotate in running backs unless it's, McCaffrey gets hurt or something. Maybe that changes at some point, but that's the only thing. But I agree. I think Robinson is on that short list of guys that, can, kind of approach McCaffrey production. And it's a tough running back class this year. So, Robinson, Breece Hall, and Jonathan Taylor, I think those are the 3 guys that I'm looking at up top. But Robinson should have a monster year. Hopefully he's not the Kyle Pitts of running backs. Rashid Shaheed is my next breakout candidate. And this one, going a little bit deeper in the weeds here, he's not a, sexy rookie or second year breakout candidate. He's in his 3rd year, but I really like, the kind of player he is. Number one, he can play inside or outside. He split his snaps about 50-50, wider, between out wide and the slot last year. For his career, he's averaging just under 2 yards per route, which is very good. And he has a career 68% catch rate and is averaging over 16 yards per catch and an ADOT of about 14. So, that's really tough to be that efficient with, when you're getting a lot of downfield targets. And speaking of downfield targets, last season on a team that, employed Derek Carr at quarterback for most of the year, who is not a great a deep thrower, Rashid Shaheed, 474 receiving yards on deep targets, which are targets 20 or more yards down the field. That was 5th in the entire National Football League among wide receivers, behind only Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, and DJ Moore. 5 touchdowns on deep passes, was top 3 among wide receivers. And this year, Quint Kubiak, finally the Saints go away from Carmichael and they got a new offensive coordinator, Kubiak. I think that equals more motion and more yard after catch opportunities for Shaheed. So Shaheed was kind of, even though he's a, shifty, agile, speedy guy, very good returner as well. He was kind of boxed into mostly a, low percentage deep route role, and he still was efficient. But now he could supplement that with, I think, a lot more stuff near the line of scrimmage. You also, Alvin Kamara was targeted on 35% of his routes last year. I think that's going to regress. Michael Thomas no longer with the Saints. So you have a chance for Shaheed to even finish the season as that number 2 target on New Orleans behind Chris Olave, depending on what happens with the running backs, because, the other receiving spot is more of, A.T. Perry tethered to the line of scrimmage. You don't foresee as many targets per route, as much efficiency there. So really like Rashid Shaheed. I think he can be a great fantasy pick, and I think he can make some splash plays for the Saints, especially, now that he's, I think, going to get more opportunities. I mean, this guy, he might play, 80% of the snaps on offense. He might be kind of the new, chess piece for New Orleans. Taysom Hill is like 34. Rashid Shaheed, he can give him jet sweeps. You can put him in the return game. He can go deep. He can go underneath. Really like Shaheed, to break out in his 3rd year with the Saints.
Taysom Hill's going to be 34 in August. That is, that's wild. It still feels like he's a young pup, but not the case. It also seemed like Carr and Olave at times, and at least in the primetime spots, where they just didn't seem to fully. I know Olave had a good back end of the year, but middle of the year there was some growing pains between the two of those guys. But
I don't think they like each other very much.
Yeah,
honestly, that's the sense I got. No inside source, but just watching and reading between the TVs, reading all the tweets that those guys send out. I just don't think Olave likes Derek Carr very much. So hopefully Carr just throws to Shaheed more to get back at him.
All right, Matt, you got thoughts on Shaheed?
Yeah, absolutely love this call out by Raybon. Shaheed, with the returning ability that he has, could be really interesting as a anytime touchdown bet during the year, because especially, who knows, especially early in the year, how the return rules are going to factor in. But Shaheed has a ton of talent as a return man, one of the best in the league. And if the Saints can figure that out, Shaheed could be, live to get a touchdown basically anytime he touches the ball on a kickoff return. So that's interesting. And then I gotta say, from the fantasy perspective, perfect as a best ball pick because of that deep ball volatility. Really great as an SGP type of play, because I mean, if he scores a touchdown, there's a really good chance that he has a whole lot of yards to go along with it. And, sports books might not be correlating those two things as accurately as they should be. So when you're building an SGP, I think that's also really intriguing for Shaheed, and then also, for DFS. I think that's also Shaheed is a really intriguing option there, because if he scores a touchdown, again, it's the same idea as the SGP. There could be a whole lot of yards that go along with it. So Shaheed, just kind of structurally on the type of player he is, he's really intriguing. And then all of the offensive contextual things that Raybon talked about, you can also put that on there and see how it is that Shaheed at the end of the year, you're like, wait a minute, this guy ended up having like 10 touchdowns and 1,000 scrimmage yards, because he took a couple end arounds for long gains, like different things like that, with them using him in a more sort of like, all around weapon Taysom Hill type of way. He could be really intriguing. So I love that call out.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah, he had 6 total touchdowns last year, 5 through the air. With the New Orleans Saints, Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints. We mentioned, we highlighted some of the guys that you guys targeted last year going into this kind of episode. And one of the names that did come up was Dalton Kincaid on Raybon's front. Friedman, you have more praise for Kincaid going into 2024.
Yeah, absolutely love Kincaid. He had, like a rookie year breakout. I think now he has like the 2nd year breakout, where he goes from being a guy who was great in that offense to a guy who, if everything breaks right, ends up having like a sort of peak Travis Kelce type of season. You're in a situation with the Bills where Stephon Diggs is gone. Gabriel Davis is gone. The guys who are, presumably going to be called upon at the wide receiver to replace them, they do not have any established chemistry with Josh Allen. And then you look at Dalton Kincaid, who did very well last year in his first season, I think could take a big step forward in his second season. And based on the style of tight end he can play in the slot. He can line up out wide if they need him to. He can be in 2 tight end sets without that really impacting his ability to produce. And so Kincaid, I think he could be the top target earner in that Bills offense. And if he's the number 1 guy in a passing attack led by Josh Allen, I mean, he could have like 1,200, 1,300 yards without it actually seeming like it was an unrealistic thing for him to get there. So Dalton Kincaid, as great as he was as a rookie, I think there's the runway for him to take another really big step forward this year.
It's like, it kind of reminds me of, remember the Niners, George Kittle's second year before they had Debo and Ayuk and all those guys. Kittle went off for just under 1,400 yards in year 2. And I see that kind of upside for Kincaid because anytime you have a tight end that's going to be its team's number 1 target, you just have massive upside. And then you hit on it. Like, it's not just he's his team's number 1 target. He's his team's number 1 target for one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So yeah, a lot of upside. And I think I'm going to have to put Kincaid over Trey McBride in my rankings, because I think Kelsey, Laporta, but Kincaid really I think has upside that McBride doesn't because of Harrison being there.
And what I like about the Kincaid factor in all of this from the fantasy perspective is that if you're looking at ADP, you can normally get Kincaid later than Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Andrews, and in some cases, even Pitts. So I think he has the upside of all of those guys, but you're not having to pay for that upside. So I really like being able to get him in fantasy.
Imagine taking Kyle Pitts over Dalton Kincaid before Kincaid's 1,400 yard season, where Pitts goes for like his normal 800 yards and 1 touchdown. Like, it would be miserable. Don't do that.
George Kittle in 18, 136 targets, 88 grabs. The next receiver on that Niners team was Kendrick Bourne.
Ooh.
And I mean, no
Sweet,
Diggs, no Gabe Davis.
Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah. So that's interesting, right? Because Diggs is gone. Gabe Davis got some money from the Jaguars. So, right, Shakir would right now set up to be their number 1 receiver going into the year, or maybe Keon Johnson.
Yeah, I think it's an open Coleman. I think it's an open competition. I mean, Samuel even could end up catching the most passes if Coleman doesn't pan out. But I think Shakir it has I think Shakir is probably the favorite at this point.
Okay, all right, good one. Dalton Kincaid. Speaking of repeat names, so Matthew Friedman gave out Zamir White last year. Raybon's looking at him this year. He is the lead back right now, Raybon, in Vegas with Josh Jacobs in Green Bay.
Yeah, and I think, talked about earlier, whiffed on Alexander Madison last year. So we're going with a Madison adjacent back because now Madison, is backing up Zamir White, which, given that he was such a whiff last year is a good thing, because I mean, this backfield, it's Madison, it's Amir Abdullah, maybe, Britton Brown. I mean, not much to speak of. So I think
White probably New Hampshire.
Yeah. He's probably the best one, to be honest, but he's a rookie. But right. I think the key is, when you're looking for breakouts, you're looking for a mix of talent and opportunity, right? Okay, so let's talk about the talents. White last year, 79th percentile among qualified backs in yards after contact at 3.21. And yards after contact, when you're evaluating running backs, that's what you want to look at, because yards before contact, it's a lot more statistically explained by the offensive line. It's not as sticky from one year to the next. Now, there are some backs that, are better at avoiding, contact or, and finding the hole. But overall, you want a guy that's going to get hit and keep on moving. And Zamir White can do just that. Also, another positive, 19% target per route rate last year. That's just a hair above the league average for running backs, which is good, because I don't think White is thought of as much of a pass catcher. But we saw the last 4 weeks and Freeman, you talked about this earlier. The last 4 weeks, we got a preview of Zamir White in a featured role. Josh Jacobs was not able to suit up, and Zamir White put up 21 carries for 99 yards rushing on average through those 4 games, and then caught another 2.3 balls for 15 yards through the air. So overall, that's 23 touches for 114 scrimmage yards per game over the final 4 weeks. Those 4 weeks came with Antonio Pierce at head coach. I think, even though he's not an offensive coach, he's a defensive coach. He wants the Raiders to be more of a run heavy kind of defensive minded team. And you saw that in terms of the, run pass splits, and the fact that with McDaniels, Raider running backs averaged 19.3 carries collectively per game. With Pierce, that jumped up to 24.3. So, even if Zamir White, seeds a couple carries here to Madison or a lob or maybe some pass down work, there should still be a lot of opportunities for the Raider backfield. And I think the upside here is a season similar to Josh Jacobs a couple years ago, where he could just continue to kind of take a stranglehold of that backfield like he did over those last 4 weeks. And, the Raiders just kind of try to survive and hide their, monstrosity of a quarterback situation, and just throw enough to, kind of placate Devontae Adams and make sure he's not, going crazy and trying to get out of there like he was with McDaniels. But overall, yeah, I think White is in prime position to break out. I like him as a fantasy pick. I just think he has a lot of power, and he's the exact type of back that the Raiders need, and that the Raiders are going to want to use this year, given the makeup of their team.
The incompetence at quarterback might actually be very beneficial to this pick. And not to mention, you said it, Adams in this receiver documentary on Netflix. It's not good. That was last year. Who knows how it looks this year with, in theory, worse quarterback play.
But a pretty good offensive line, because I know you might, Glash, I know you were probably going to ask about that, but, James at the center position ranked top 10 in PFF, Miller and Mumford at the guards. I mean, at the tackles are pretty good as well. And so, you have everything kind of set up, but the quarterback situation. But I mean, look at Minshew last year, Taylor, Moss, indoors, they played well. And then if it's O'Connell, that means that he probably is at least equal to Minshew. So yeah, cautiously optimistic that they can survive, like you said, even though the quarterback is the weak point.
Yeah, didn't have to ask. You did it for me. Thank you, Raybon. As I know you love follow-up questions. Friedman, you got thoughts. White was one of your guys last year. How do you feel about this year?
Still love it. Riding with Raybon on this one. And, you can look in the season-long prop market. Zamir White's number is 775.5. I think he could absolutely smash that. I have this projected at 930.7, looking at my fantasy life projections right now. And we've a natural plug right here. We've launched the Fantasy Life Plus package, and part of that is the utilization report, which allows you to look at the production and the underlying usage for players, and you can slice it and dice it, based on different splits. And so if you look at just the last 4 games of the season, when Zamir White was the guy last year, he had a 70% snap rate and a 76% share of the rushing workload. Those are like near elite numbers for a running back. And, granted, the Raiders went 3-1 last year in that stretch, and their one loss, it was only 3 points. And so that's maybe not representative of what they are likely to have this year. But as Raybon mentioned, even if they are in a negative game script for a lot of the year, defensive head coach Antonio Pierce is likely to want the offense to have a run-focused, ball control type of approach. I think Zamir White just absolutely crushes in the prop market here, and then from the fantasy perspective as well.
Yeah, I got him at 901, so about not as high as your 930, but well over his season-long prop as well in terms of the rushing yards for White.
Okay, we go to the fourth breakout candidate for Matthew Freeman. We're going back to this rookie class, but we're looking at receiver. What do you got?
Yeah, Xavier Worthy is the guy I'm looking at. And, sort of like Rashid Rice last year. This is just going to be a very simplistic type of analysis here, but we have, we've got the Chiefs hat right up there. Maybe the best quarterback of all time. I'm not saying that Mahomes is better than Brady yet, but what we've seen out of Mahomes to this point in his career, he is on, the trajectory to rival Tom Brady. So one of the best quarterbacks of all time being paired with the fastest combine time wide receiver in NFL history. And we know what that offense is capable of when it has had a competent deep threat. And I will say Xavier Worthy is not just a speedster. He was a high quality wide receiver at the University of Texas, especially what he did there as a freshman, leading that team in receiving. Like if a guy can break out as a freshman, at a Power 5 school, that actually means something. And then for him to tear it up at the combine the way he did, and then have that draft capital invested in him, and then to be paired with, a great play caller and a great quarterback, Xavier Worthy has a world of potential this year. And it's not to say that like he could be Tyreek Hill 2.0, because like probably no one can ever replicate what Tyreek Hill has done in the NFL, but Xavier Worthy can, I think, make his own mark. And I think people are kind of discounting a little bit the Chiefs offense because of how it underperformed last year. But if you look at all of the years before that, even the Alex Smith year of 2017, this was a top 10 offense in points and yards per play, top 6 in a lot of cases. And I think we see them get back to that type of mark. So if we have a top 6 type of offense with a speedster who is not going to have a ton of coverage going in his direction because of the other players on the field, there will be opportunities each game where he just blows by a safety. And Mahomes, like we saw it in practice, like I'm not going to like be the guy who's like, did you see what happened? But like we've already seen instances of Mahomes being able to navigate the pocket, escape the pocket, extend plays, and throw it 60 yards downfield, and Xavier Worthy can beat his guy and go get the ball. I think we will see multiple instances of that this year, and it would not surprise me at all if we enter fantasy drafts in 2025 and people are talking about Xavier Worthy as a low-end wide receiver 1.
Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes will never have to think about Kadarius Toney again.
Hopefully.
Running back Kadarius Toney, that is.
Yeah,
I heard they're going to use him in the backfield some this year.
As long as Worthy can line up the right way, and if it doesn't get called.
Oh, man.
We got one more bonus pick here. We got a breakout candidate number 5 from Friedman. He's got one more for us before we get out of here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Tank Dell, who was awesome last year. I wouldn't say unexpectedly awesome, but he was a 3rd rounder and he was small entering the league. And so, there are naturally going to be questions, especially when he's playing with a rookie quarterback on a team that people weren't expecting much from. Man, he was awesome last year. And I think people are kind of discounting how good he was because of the injury. And then the fact that Nico Collins also looked really good. And if you're looking at fantasy drafts right now, people are valuing Nico Collins as if he is a true wide receiver 1, and they are valuing Tank Dell as if he is a supplementary type of wide receiver. And I think Dell is just as good as Nico Collins. And I think with Bobby Slowick being retained as the offensive play caller there, with CJ Stroud progressing another year in his career, like as great as Stroud was last year, he could be somehow even better in his second season, with Tank Dell returning from injury and him maturing in his second season as a professional. I think at the end of this year, it could be like, wow, like Tank Dell was basically like not quite peak Antonio Brown, but like really close to it. And like a wide receiver, like true wide receiver 1 that no one even questions, like, oh, is this guy like a legit NFL receiver? It's like, wow, like the Texans could be amazing for years to come with Dell paired with CJ Stroud.
Man, that is the downside of not going into podcast outlines first, because I would have loved to talk about Tank Dell. I still remember the first preseason game I watched him. I think it was against the Patriots, And it took me like 3 snaps. And I remember saying to one of our editors here, Matthew Treby, like, this is the best Houston receiver already. Like, it's already, and Antonio Brown, Friedman, was the guy that I was thinking about. And I think about when I watch Dell. So the fact that you kind of mentioned, oh, he might not be peak Antonio Brown. I mean, he plays like peak Antonio Brown. Like, if you watch, and I love CJ Stroud. So I went, watched a ton of all 22 on Stroud and that whole offense. I mean, that's the guy. I can't think of a better comp for Tank Dell in terms of how he plays, how he, the suddenness, the routes, than a guy like Antonio Brown. So yeah, if let's say Diggs, Collins, and Dell are all healthy for 17 games, I think Dell has just as much of a shot as those other 2 guys, if not a better shot at being the most productive Houston Texan receiver. He is that good. And we were able to learn that in only half a season. So the sky's the limit for this guy. Love Tank Dell, and he's got the 2nd best quarterback in the league.
All right. And he will be a full participant in training camp. That's what all the reports indicate on Tank Dell, coming back from the injury, missed the last month of the season. All right. I think that's going to do it. Matthew Friedman, you mentioned your the utilization tool now available over at Fantasy Life. Anything else you'd like to plug before we let you go?
Oh man. So, we've got everything, free that we've had previously. So the Fantasy Life newsletter, everyone should be subscribing to that. You get it every day. It's totally free. We got free rankings, free content, but we've also launched the premium product, Fantasy Life Plus, which comes with, some premium tools where you can customize rankings based on your league settings, and they will change, to match what it is that you have going on. We have a draft simulator. We have some syncing tools for your league. So if you want to level up your fantasy experience, check out Fantasy Life Plus over at Fantasy Life.
Excellent. Matthew Friedman of Fantasy Life. Chris Raybon, you can find him, of course, here on the Action Network podcast, over on the Fantasy Flex podcast every week leading up to the NFL season. That is going to conclude our annual NFL Breakout Candidates episode here on the Action Network podcast. We are presented by our friends at BetMGM. For Matthew Friedman, Chris Raybon, Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.